And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We have officially hit episode 300. Woo! This is where I'm putting like
Woo!
explosions and the party memes or whatever. I can't believe we've done 300 of these. I
I
can't
can
believe
believe
people.
it. It feels like we've done 300 of these.
Well, no, I can't believe people still listen after 300 of
Well,
these.
that's because they didn't listen to the first 200. So,
That's fair. They didn't listen to us going back and forth being absolute morons while Adam was around talking about Sebastian Giovinco as a number 10 or a number 9 or whatever.
I'll say it though. I think that was our peak. I think we
That
peaked
was,
at
we
that
missed
point and we'll
those
never get
days.
back up to that.
Yeah, because now we're all professional. We have 600 subscribers on YouTube. We need to be all official,
Yeah,
which is
and we have to
actually.
we have like good takes now. It's like it's ridiculous, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we have good takes. We do have the occasional, Connor take, which is pretty much all of his takes. It's just light the internet on fire and go that way. But no,
Anything for
listen,
views.
listen, we hit 600 on YouTube. That is officially official. Very, very excited for that. And we keep moving. We're only like 50 watch hours away from reaching the first tier of being a YouTube partner, which is exciting. And all of that to say, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening so far. If you are new here and you're stumbling across this and you don't know what we do, just listen. You'll enjoy it. But also subscribe and give us likes and comments and stuff because that's what we do. That's what we're all about. So, and then every once in a while, you can say hi to you can come onto these videos and say hi to Grace. Come here. Come here. Sit. Sit.
Now she doesn't want to make an
Now
appearance.
she doesn't. Yeah, sit. Come here. There you go. You could say hi to my puppy. Grace loves being a puppy. Yes, she does. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Yes, you do. Okay, we're gonna go down now. Ready? One, two, three. Yes, you so good. All right.
I
Um,
hated every bit of that.
you just don't get it. You just don't get it. No, thanks everybody for listening to this point. If you subscribed or if you just listen, we appreciate you and we hope you will continue to enjoy what we do.
I hope I start to enjoy what we're doing.
I'm every day I wait for the day for you to be like, yeah, I'm done. I'm over. I'm done with you.
I'm not going
Uh,
anywhere anytime soon. Not unless I'm forced to.
10 more years. 10 more years.
Only 10?
Only 10 for now. Then we re-up your contract.
Okay, okay.
I'll triple what I'm paying you now if you
So
make it
I'm gonna
10
have
years.
$3.
We do have to break up the funds from the advertisements. I gotta send you your 35 cents. Oh man. All right, we've waffled on long enough. But if you clicked on the title, you know what we're talking about. This is just us wrapping up the season by addressing Don Garber's State of the League address. So on Friday before MLS Cup, I don't know what MLS Cup is. That doesn't make any sense to me. We heard from the commissioner who gave his annual State of the League address. So he addressed a ton of different things: salary caps, Leagues Cup, U.S. Open Cup. I mean, he went through a ton of it. So we are just going to go down. I'm going to read through some of the threads here that were posted about it and see if we can hit some talking points here. So before we do that, of course, it's all about Scarf of the Week, baby. What are you rocking?
I'm bringing out the scarf of one of the few teams that was mentioned in the episode.
Name dropped.
Name dropped. San Jose, the Quakes, for our lovely Brucey boy.
He
We'll
did
get to
get
more on
named.
that later, I'm sure.
He got briefly name dropped.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
that.
I got more thoughts on that later.
Yeah. Well, if I don't get it hooked in my headphones again, as I seem to always do, I'm breaking out a new scarf, and it's one of the scarves. God,
You are a mess over there. My
I'm
goodness.
struggle bus over here. One of the scarves that is a one-sided rivalry. They hate us, and we don't know they exist. Up the Union with the little snake in the middle. That is David Ochoa in the middle, if I remember correctly.
He's still, didn't he got his contract extended or
He
his option
did.
picked up.
Well, here's the deal. I think the double side is cool. It's different colors but the same text, right? But it can't go higher than a 7 out of 10 Because what doesn't it do? It's the same logo on each side. Does it meet in the middle? Absolutely not. Minus 3 points, just right off the bat.
The Union logo with the snake in it, I thought for a second that that was the Philadelphia Union 2 logo. I was like, that's a deep cut scarf. You're getting the reserve
Dude,
team
that
scarf.
would be sick. I should start collecting. Once they all do their rebrand, I should start collecting reserve team. Once I get through all the other
You
ones.
need to save some money. Okay. We can't do
I'm sorry.
designated players. What do you call it?
The DP Pod away days?
Yeah, we can't do that if you have no money to spend.
Please. I've got tons of money to spend. Grace only gets 75% of my paycheck. Everything else goes straight to DP Pod. So,
I get
uh,
a portion of that too. I get my $1.
you do, you do. Let's dive right into this, and I'm kind of just going to go over the timeline here. So, shout out Michael Batista, a really great beat reporter for New York soccer in general. So not only Red Bull and New York City, but also into the lower leagues all across New York and New Jersey. He does a really good job of covering soccer from top to bottom. So go give him a follow if you haven't already on Blue Sky and on Twitter. But I'm going to go through his Blue Sky feed here, his live tweets of what was happening during the press conference, and I will stop and we'll chat about kind of our ideas on what he says. Cool.
Well, I have notes on the whole press conference because I listened to the whole thing.
See,
So
I was going to,
I'll
and you were like, "We need to record right now." I'm like,
it
"Okay."
was like 45 minutes after you told me you were gonna finish watching the Jets lose, which took another like 10 minutes,
The Jets went into overtime,
and
so
they lost.
yeah, they did, but that's okay. You know what then? It's all yours, buddy. You are in charge today. I will let you run the show and I'll give you my thoughts. Because I still have thoughts based off of the conversations that were tweeted or skeeted about.
That's fine. You can jump in as I
Yeah,
go through. My
lead
notes are
it.
in chronological order.
It only
So
took you
we
300 episodes to finally take charge and do something. So on you go.
so we'll go in order of the way that the press conference went, and you can jump in if you think if I missed anything chronologically. I didn't write down notes for everything. I just wrote down notes for stuff that I thought was important. So I'll start off with my first note, and that being Don Garber mentioning that 63 games this season were played at different times. And that I looked at this one specifically because I think it's a very interesting topic of debate throughout the entire season. And I did a little math, as I
Hmm.
do, because I'm a numbers nerd.
Nerd.
And there were, if my calculations are correct, 493 regular season games. He's saying 63 of those games were at different times. I don't know how he's getting to that number. I don't if each
No,
game counts, huh?
if I remember correctly, he's saying that they used to have 60 plus start dates and times, and then they just switched to Wednesday and Saturday at one time.
Okay, got it.
Good start.
Still, it's the same reason I wanted to have this on here because there was a lot of talk about games being like 8 different games being on at the same time and it just being like too much at one time. I personally think that is a valid criticism. I understand you want to have some consistency in terms of when teams are playing so people know when to tune in. But my goodness, can we throw in like a an occasional Friday game, an occasional like early afternoon game? Like, do we need to have, let me do the math. Is it 14 games every weekend? So do we need to have 10 of the 14 or like 12 of the 14 games being played at the same time on Saturdays? It's a little much. Like, I'd rather be spaced out a little bit more. I'd be more willing to watch more games. Instead, you kind of have to tune into like the goal rush, whatever, I forget what they call it,
MLS
360.
360.
I didn't remember if they had like a
We
specific
love
name for
MLS
that.
360.
Instead, you have to tune into 360 because how are you watching 8 games at once? Like it's just impossible. Like I wish they would spread it out a little bit more. Throw a few games on Sunday, an early afternoon game on Saturday. Give me a Friday game every once in a while. Like I understand it's hard because you have 5 billion tournaments that you're involved in, but I'm in agreement that it's annoying to have to watch 12 games going on at one time.
No, 100% don't disagree with you at all. I understand where they're coming from. I think 360 was an innovative idea. It was something that they could give a try to. And I don't hate 360. Like once Red Bull finish, I can turn on 360 to watch the Western Conference games and roll with it. That being said, 100% agree with you. I would love to have almost like an NFL like split on Saturdays. You've got a handful of games starting on 7:30 split. A handful of games, or even move it up to 7. Don't do 7:30. Go 7 and 9:30, right? And then throw two games on Sunday and one on Friday, right? Split it up that way. I think that's a better way to do that. But I do understand, right? You're going up against NFL, college football. You're going up against, a whole bunch of other different things. So you have to figure out what works best for your attention, and you have to kind of get a feel for, how many of your fans are picking your games over whatever else is happening, right? The amount of people that you see, and again, I know online is not a huge indicator of what the true normal fan is, what I'll call it. The normal fan is, right? But the amount of people who jump on and be like, oh yeah, I didn't watch games this week because Clemson UGA were on at 7:30, and that was a game I picked over Red Bull versus Vancouver, whatever, right? Like there's more that goes into it, and it's not going to be a perfect thing, but I completely agree with you to move to different times. Now, I will agree with Don here and say that it has driven. So his comment is that the schedule being consistent drove fan enjoyment, right? And I think what that means, because again, we know that you can't explain everything in your quick little 40-minute press conference. But I think what he's trying to say is you have more people showing up to games. You have more people tuning in on TV because they're not, oh man, I didn't realize that a game was at this time or that time or this time or that time. You know every week what time it's on, and you know every week if you can make it, right? Then the number of attendance in the stadiums has significantly increased when you don't have to play half of your summer games at 1 p.m., right? When everybody else is playing soccer. But I still agree with you, right? I would love to see it stretched out a little bit more and spread out. And I do believe, if I remember correctly, and I don't know if this is in your notes, and I'm jumping you,
Here,
that they are planning on adding a Sunday game of the week and like really, really hitting it hard. So that'd be pretty cool.
yeah, but they've already kind of had games on Sunday, so that's not really changing a ton. And I think you make a good point where if you switch it around, you're probably hurting in-person attendance a little bit more.
Hmm.
But I think you're gonna do more for the people watching at home. And I don't know what the contrast in numbers is, whether it's like a significant amount of more people are going in person for games versus watching on TV. But I'm not saying we need a drastic change. Just a couple. Like you could totally throw a game on a Friday and be fine. Like I think people will still show up to the game.
Hmm.
You're not competing with the NFL. You're not competing with college football. Friday, I think you can make one game work in there, and then put two games on Sunday, one game earlier in the day on Saturday. Like I'm not saying you need to like throw half the games on Friday, like a handful on Sunday, and you have like three games on Saturday. But
Hmm.
a little bit more change, I think, would be nice.
No, 100%. Couldn't agree with you more. And again, I'm just, me. I always like to look at it from both sides. Why do we do it, and how can we make it better, right? So, totally agree. And I do think that as we get a foothold with Apple TV, and they get a feel for where their numbers are at, and if they start doing revenue sharing and all that stuff, then they can start saying, okay, we don't really care about the. So for example, somebody asked me like, oh, why did MLS Cup get played at 4 p.m. on a Saturday? Right? We all were coaching or watching our kids play. A lot of us didn't see it. We had to watch it back. And I think that was because they had to put it on Fox, that linear, the linear cable channel. And Fox probably only fit it in at 4 o'clock. Whereas once they get a good foothold and say, okay, this is a number. And by the way, it was free on Apple TV too. Like people could have gone on and watched it on Apple TV. But once they get a feel for, like, okay, people know where we're at, they know where it is. I think then they start can control when games are played and when they're going to broadcast them. So I
Uh,
have I have hope that that can change. I guess if we're rounding that off.
all right, I have a bunch more notes here, so I don't want to
Yeah,
keep
we should
waffling
we
on
should
about
yeah,
this
I
for
know.
too
We
long.
because we could talk about this for hours.
My next note on here, it's I think a quick one that we could hit, and we can move on to the next one. He mentioned CONCACAF Champions Cup, performance, and he said that he believes MLS sides have improved dramatically. I think the word dramatically is a little bit extreme here. I mean, I think there's been some improvement over the years, but I feel like it's a strange time to say that they've improved dramatically when a Liga MX team won it, first of all. And second of all, there were a number of terrible performances from MLS teams in this year's CONCACAF Champions Cup. I mean, you could say like, oh, more teams are moving on further, but at the same time, I feel like you're getting more and more teams in CONCACAF Champions Cup. It's like it's a numbers game. It's like the more teams you get in there, the more you're gonna continue to see them move on further. I think they have improved, but I feel like the use of the word dramatically improved there is a little extreme.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there, though I do. Again, dramatically is it's a relative term, right? Depending on how far back you look and what you take as improved, like what are you improving on, your style of play, your competitiveness, things like that. We're seeing more teams in the final than we ever did before, right? Now you can say that we are getting more teams in there. The CONCACAF Champions Cup expanded in 2024 to include 5 MLS clubs, the U.S. Open Cup, and the Canadian Championship, and the Leagues Cup. So that is what 10. So yeah, You're right. You should be seeing that number increase significantly. I no disagreements there. I do think that there's been improvement. I will agree with you, but I don't know if again, are you talking dramatically like year over year? Probably not. It's been a slower improvement over time, but I don't know if you can say like from last year to this year is dramatic. Like from 2010 to now is dramatic. Sure. I guess where that comparison point starts is important to draw your conclusions, right?
Yeah, no, I get that. But like at the same time, why are you comparing the current state of where we are in CONCACAF Champions Cup to 2010? It would just be an unnecessary comparison to be like, oh yeah, we've improved a ton over the last 15 years. Like, well, yeah, it's a completely different game. Like, there's so much more investment. Like, it's like night and day in a lot of different regards. It's like I want to be comparing to how we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years, as opposed to what we were doing back in 2010 when like your designated player was some 38-year-old Italian that played for like Fiorentina for 15 games of his career. Like I just think we should be comparing to something more like reasonable to compare to for if that is the case where you're saying we've dramatically improved. But
Mhm.
he didn't specify, so I'm not going to sit here and speculate. I think we
No,
should
but
just go on to the next point.
well, what I'll say is you do need to draw back to those sorts of times to show. Yeah, I think it's easy to forget
Mhm.
when you look year over year where you came from, right? Especially when the improvement isn't as drastic in year over year, when something like this is something you have to measure long term, and it's a small blip in your sports calendar, right? When you're planning games like this, it's 3 or 4 games for the most part, and then you move on. So it's easy to forget where we came from. And like I said, I remember watching Red Bull versus Vancouver in 2016 and being like, "Oh my God, we're so massive." And Alfonso Davy comes in, cuts us up, and then we're gone. But that was not significantly improved in 2017 or 2018, right? But comparing that to where we are now is important to know, okay, at least the changes that we are making or the way that we are playing is showing an improvement in some way. Now, if you're one of the people, and not saying it's wrong to be this type of person who's saying like we need to improve now and start winning consistently every single year, then yeah, it's not dramatic enough. But considering how quickly the league and our competitiveness has changed year over year over the last, let's say, decade, I do think it's an important point to focus on. But again, it all just depends on where you're looking at it from, right?
All right, I'm going on to the next point because I still have plenty more to go, and we're 2 points in, and we're like 25 minutes in already. So
We'll deal with it. This is
no,
what
no,
we
no,
call friendship.
no. You and Don, your beautiful friendship, is that what your friendship is? All right, next point. I don't have written down who asked these questions, so I apologize in advance. But if you want to go find out, just go watch the press conference. It's on YouTube. Someone had asked about the schedule change going to a European schedule. I personally didn't feel like he really gave an answer. I know he kind of like was like, yeah, we were like talking about it. It's in discussion. Like, obviously, there's a lot of tournaments and stuff coming up, and that's going to have an effect on the schedule change, but he didn't really give an answer as to whether or not it's happening. So by that, I'm going to assume it's not happening unless he says otherwise. So I would say reading between the lines a little bit, but I think that probably means no schedule change as of right now.
Yes, I don't think that they're pushing it through from what I was reading and kind of interacting with. I don't think it's being pushed through tomorrow. I would say that their goal is probably 2027. Right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these big changes that they're talking about, the salary caps, the schedule changes, all this stuff. I think that it is a goal of 2027, right? Get the hype in from World Cup, get all the eyes going, and then big drastic changes because those changes to the majority of the people who are then watching, not really a change, it's just the way it is, right? So that's the vibe I took from that for sure.
Yeah. No, I would definitely agree with that. And I'll take one of my points I had later on and just kind of mesh it with that. He talked about that the league is going to be taking off for the 2026 World Cup, and he said that they're going to be taking off for a portion of the 2025 Club World Cup. What portion of it? I don't know. He didn't really specify, but that to me, like if they have that already in the books, I think you're definitely spot on that it's not happening until the earliest 2027. I don't know if they'll announce it before that point, but if they already have plans that they're going to be taking off for the World Cup and part of the Club World Cup, it's probably because the schedule is not changing. So I would agree with you. I think 2027 is the earliest we'll hear about that. Next point I had, quick one. It kind of goes back to the viewership again, but I thought he made a really interesting point with people watching on cable versus people watching on Apple TV, where people on Apple TV are intentionally buying this service to watch MLS. And so I
Mhm.
think you're going to get a more dedicated viewer in that case versus somebody who has cable and just happens to like be flipping through and find a game on and watches it or whatnot. I think you're going to get a more dedicated viewer for somebody who's going to go out of their way to buy Apple TV. They're going to be ones that watch the games more often. He talked about how the average viewer watches 65 minutes of the 90-minute game. So I think the Apple TV viewers are probably skewing that a bit higher than the cable TV viewers. So it makes me think that maybe that's the way they could try to go down more is trying to get the people that are intentionally buying. You can get a better idea of who truly is like a fan of the league, a follower of the league, who's going to be more willing to spend money on it versus somebody who just like happens to flip through and find it on. I just thought it was an interesting point.
I have a lot of really strong opinions on this
Interesting. I'm
because
curious. What are your strong opinions on this?
I've got strong opinions on the people who complain about the Apple TV deal
Mm,
because a lot of people I'm trying so hard like if I haven't I don't do New Year's resolutions. My New Year's resolution is to stop using a lot of people or all these people like as this general overarching term because it's not true, right? But I have heard a lot of times when speaking to individuals or on social media or whatever, like MLS is killing its attention because it doesn't have the games on cable TV so that the casual can just flip on and turn to it, right? It was on cable TV for 25 years. The casual did not flip on and turn on those games. There's a reason that they went this direction. If the casual wanted to do it or was genuinely interested in what it was providing. Apple TV plays like 40% of the games for free anyway. So the odds that you would flip through the TV and go, "Ooh, an MLS game, I'm going to keep that on," instead of flipping on to Jeopardy or to Wheel of Fortune like Pops always used to do, versus being on Apple TV and seeing an ad and then clicking on there and realizing, "Oh, that's a free game of the week." I especially with the global reach of Apple TV, I think you're picking up the same amount of casuals. And the people who complain that, "Oh, it is killing its general overreach." I think on paper, yeah, absolutely. I think that there is a lack of knowledge of what's going on to the general viewer or supporter. But that same person is not like, oh man, if it was on cable TV, I'd be watching it every week. That same person is the one who watches the Premier League or the Bundesliga or the La Liga or whatever, and then is too busy to watch something at 7:30 at night. That has always been my belief because I was there for the early 2010s all the way down through where we are now. And there are people who are been there way longer than I have. But those games on ESPN or Fox were disgusting. They were not given the time of day. And you remember, you watched some of them on ESPN too. They had no like dedicated coverage, or they had dedicated coverage, but the camera quality sucked. It was always half the time it got pushed back for some other game going into overtime. Like this is a dedicated service. I think it's a good deal. Now, I'm happy to hear that argument. The oh we don't have the general reach, but I would love to see somebody try and find the data of the general fan who accidentally flipped onto an MLS game on ESPN on a Sunday and was instantly hooked from the day. Because I don't believe that number is as big as people want to make it sound, which is why I think when people are like, oh my God, they won't release the Apple numbers, that means they must be bad. I think they're exactly where they expected them to be. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit too, because he didn't report them. But I have such doubt that there are the people out there who are like, if it was on cable TV, I'd be watching every week. Now there are people who are like, oh, I used to watch it on cable every week, and I'm not going to buy Apple because I don't want to spend on another service. Fine, but I don't believe that there are the people who didn't watch before who are then saying, oh, I would have watched if it didn't go to Apple, and then they're just complaining to complain. Rant over. Go Red Bull.
I mean, even the last person that you're talking about, the one that has cable and doesn't want to pay for an extra service, I get that as well. But like you said, there are so many free games. Who cares? Like, just watch the free game. Like, I get it. You might be missing out on your team specifically, like watching them every week. You could still watch games if you're a fan of the league. Like, there's plenty of free games to watch. I think the people you're talking about in terms of the ones that are saying Apple deal's bad, I think it's just the anti MLS crowd that is looking for anything that they possibly can to just be like, oh, MLS is destroying their league, and we need to build something else up so that we can do it for the fans and think about the fans and all that. I 100% agree with you. The Fox ESPN coverage was terrible. They would, like you said, it would get delayed for overtime games. It would get booted too. It'd be like, oh, we're gonna move this game that's on Fox Sports 1. We're gonna move it to Fox Sports 2 so that we can put on like Division 2 volleyball
Yeah,
on Fox Sports 1.
here's a perfect example. NYCFC used to have their games played at 11 p.m. because the Yankees or Yankees rerun or the Nets or whatever was on Yes, the cable network Yes, would play that game instead. I remember multiple times getting ready to turn that game on because Red Bull had a bye or they played on a different day, and I was like, okay, I'll watch New York City, and they got bumped to 11 because they didn't want to be put on in prime time when the Yankees or the Nets could be playing. So you want to talk about why they were moving away? It's because of stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I 100%. I think it's been the right move. I've been happy with it.
Yeah.
This
And
this
again,
next
I don't.
point.
Sorry, one more. I don't care if people don't love it. That's okay. Like you don't have to love it. You can complain about the time slots and not having them all spread out, whatever. But I just want to emphasize again, I don't believe that we are missing out on billions of eyeballs from people who would have just casually flipped by it and been like, oh, this is my game from now to the end of time. I don't believe that.
Yeah, no, I agree too.
How many times have you tried to get back into the gym, but gave up because you couldn't track your progress or you didn't even know where to start? I know consistency has always been an issue for me, leading to the start and stop phase of going to the gym, working out for a few sessions, and then just giving it all up before trying it all again in 6 months and getting the same exact result.
Well, today's episode sponsor, Alpha Progression app, is perfect for all levels of gym users, from those starting out for the very first time to the most experienced lifters out there.
The Alpha Progression app is the go-to app for anyone trying to maximize muscle gain. It's a science-based app developed by serious lifters with personal training and competitive bodybuilding experience.
Alpha Progression has been recognized not once, but twice as the app of the day by Apple and are the top-rated fitness app in Germany, starting its expansion overseas to the US.
I've actually given this app a try myself, and the amount of detail that you can work with is insane. Its user interface is so easy to use, even with the amount of features that it has in this app. You can choose from a quick workout logger or have the app build you a plan based on the type of training you want, the muscle groups you want to focus on, how often you plan to work out, even the splits of what you want to work out and what you want to hit on which days. It is so in-depth, it's crazy.
There are over 1,000 trillion input combinations, so you will never get bored doing the same workouts day after day, and the quality is amazing. The plans they created measure up to the best personal trainers in the world. Even professionals who cost $500 per month say that they set their plans up the same way Alpha Progression does.
And not to mention, their algorithm continues to track you as you work out, and it links your workouts together, recommending solid progressions to ensure long-term success.
Instead of paying trainers who cost $7,000 a year, you can get the Alpha Progression app for just $12.99 a month or $80 a year. I'm no mathematician, but that's almost 90% less than what you would pay those overpriced trainers.
Are you not sold yet? Sign up with a 2-week free trial to see if it works for you. And once you are hooked and ready for the full thing, get yourself 20% off the first payment with our discount code. Head over to alphaprogression.com/the DP pod, save some money, and start working to your dream self today.
My next note here, I'm very excited about.
Oh, you got strong opinions? You never have strong opinions, except for Aiden
I'm not saying
Morris.
strong opinions. I just said I'm excited about it.
Oh,
That's because our fearless leader, Don Garber, confirmed that he uses transfer market.
King.
He was asked a question about whether or not MLS teams will be able to compete in the Club World Cup against the teams from Europe. And his response was that he looked up the club transfer values on transfer market and he noticed that we were towards the bottom of that Club World Cup list. And he says he wants to work to get us higher up on that list. And I thought that was hilarious, considering that's what we all do as well. Just looking at what the clubs are valued on a transfer market.
I have a question, Mr. King, Your Highness Garber, the Majesty. How are you going to raise that? How are you going to raise that valuation? And don't say by putting more into your youth academy or your stadiums. I don't care about the billionaire owners and their valuation. I care about how your team valuation lines up, your players. How are we going to do that, sir? Thank you for your question. I'll go off air.
Next question. But yeah, obviously that's not anything like serious, but I just thought it was funny. I find it funny every time there's like a professional that uses like transfer market for stuff because that's just like it just feels like very like FIFA kind of thing to do to just be like, oh, let me look up this database to see what they're looking at.
He is me
Um,
and I is we. We are
yeah,
the same
he's one of
twins.
us. He's one of us.
One of us.
So another point that came up is he was asked the question of how MLS is viewed internationally. Like, does he feel the need that he still has to kind of vouch for the league and the league's reputation, or is it growing more and he's kind of getting less questions about how reputable the league is or what the league is bringing to the table? And his response was that when he is when he's around people internationally, he says that he's getting asked less questions than he has in the past. What that means, I don't know. That could be many different things. That could mean that maybe people, recognize the league and they don't have to ask as many questions anymore as to like what's going on, who's over there, what are the teams, all that. Or maybe it just means that they don't care. Maybe they care less than they did before and they don't even bother asking the questions. He did also say that domestically people are still asking questions. I think in the same amount as they were in the past. And to me, I think that it could be a good thing and a bad thing. I think maybe people are asking questions because they're discovering the league and they're getting into it a bit more. But I also feel like maybe they're asking questions because things are a little too complicated, like your financial system that nobody seems to still know at this point. But yeah, I just thought it was I thought it was an interesting question to see. Like, I would have been more curious for him to expand upon like what he's seen from people internationally as to how MLS is viewed. But the most I got out of it was that it's just that like people are asking less questions, which I feel like you kind of have to make your own inference on what that means.
Yeah, and again, I think this is another one where people are going to jump on something and take it for a ride. But I think it does go a couple of different ways depending on which way you look at it. I think that's a good point. And internationally, I think people get it. I think they see it as a league that they can go and find young talent and take them and develop them, sell them on for profit, right? I think that is a set understanding of this is what MLS can do. We're no longer the retirement league internationally among people who understand soccer landscape, right? Now the fans, if you look at it from that perspective, and you talk about the locals or the domestically the questions that are being asked, I think it is because they are so comfortable with understanding the European system, and we are different. And they either don't want to take the time or are unable to understand the differences, and are asking why, right? And why don't we have pro rel? Why do we have a salary cap? Why, what is GAM and TAM and all this stuff? And we've talked about it before. You can absolutely find ways to keep it simpler, but are you actually going to find that? I'm not holding my breath on it. I think that these are here for at least another 2 decades, but that's just me.
Well, I think a big indication of that, I think, will be whenever the next
CBA.
CBA goes through. Yeah. All right. I'm going to move on to the next point. I'm going to combine this with a point I have later on as well, but I don't remember the context of this one, but I know that he mentioned that he wants clubs to build teams that resonate with their fans. And I think this had to do something along the lines of like international, like buying players internationally versus like building teams through their academy. And he had talked about, oh, like the Philadelphia Union have one way in which they kind of go about building their teams versus the way that LA Galaxy goes about building their teams. And I think that's a totally fair point. And he had been asked about San Diego, like what their expectations were for their first upcoming season. And I think he kind of built upon that again. He talked about San Diego. He said he wants to see San Diego be relevant. He wants to see them be exciting, which I think everything he said about them was very fitting for what like the area I think of San Diego kind of represents. And so I think it makes a lot of sense what he's saying. Like there's going to be teams like Dallas and Philly that are known for building through their academy and having a strong academy, and they're going to continue to build that way. And then there's going to be teams like the Galaxy and San Diego and LAFC, which are going to be flashier and spending more money to bring in more big name players. I would have been more interested to hear him talk about the teams that are kind of not in one of those two categories, like a San Jose or a Sporting KC. Like, how exactly do you explain what their policy is? Because they're not exactly a team that's spending and bringing in big name players, and they're not really using their academy. So what exactly like are they building to resonate with their fans there? Like, I would have been
Mhm.
interested to hear his take on that.
Yeah, and I think kind of tying those two together, somebody asked like, oh, like what are you excited about San Diego? And he says he wants them to be successful and he wants them to have a good start and to resonate with the fans. But he goes, it's up to them. They have to build it the right way, right? We're not telling them how to build it. It's not how we do things there. But I think he's right. He mentioned, according to Michael Batista here, he mentioned that he was the one who kind of mandated that academies start popping up, right? Stop doing start working from within and promoting from within. And each team has their own path, right? LAFC are different than Chicago Fire, are different than Philly, are different than Red Bull, are different than New York City, right? And that's totally fair. And I think it gives a positive spin on the uniqueness of a parodied salary capped league, right? It's very easy to not, it's very easy to have the same kind of build between all the teams when you have a salary cap and restrictions on how you can use that salary cap. It's almost like you're forcing them to look the same almost because nobody's going to spend, very rarely are you seeing people spend money on a designated player center back or designated player goalkeeper, right? Like that very rarely happens. So now you go ahead and you say, okay, we're not mandating how you do that. We're going to give you a choice. You either do two designated players for U22s, three designated players, 322s, or you use some combination of the group. You don't need to use them all. You can use more homegrowns if you want. Like, I think it's allowing a bit more flexibility and a bit more uniqueness in the teams, and I think that is only going to be good for the league, right? And the benefit is you can change that, right? If you get to a point and you are like Chicago and you try a three designated player system next year and it goes to crap, great, blow it up, try two and four and see what you can do with that extra gam and see if you can build it properly, right? Like I don't know. I don't see it as a negative thing where you're talking about, oh, you have to build it the right way. So like Chicago doesn't need to bring in 7 Polish players like they did in 2002, right? LAFC doesn't need to have 5, Mexican internationals. They had Carlos Vela. It was great. They don't need to keep doing that anymore. And I think we're at a point where teams are going to be able to resonate with fans just because they've been here long enough, or we're getting to that point, right? Where if you've been around for 30 years, you've got your diehards, and those diehards are going to bring people around. And having the local talent is going to be good. Having the big name talent is going to be good. At the end of the day, you need to win. Winning brings people in almost as much, if not more, than individuals. So,
Yep, I agree with you there. All right, next point I think is probably going to be one of the bigger points from the press conference. He was asked about scheduling with all of these tournaments going on and what is participation in all these tournaments going to look like with the Club World Cup coming up and US Open Cup and Leagues Cup and MLS regular season and CONCACAF Champions Cup. It's just like this endless list of different competitions that is coming up in 2025. And one thing that he did mention, and I think you'll probably touch on this with more detail, is he said there would be more teams participating in the US Open Cup this upcoming season. So doesn't sound like they're going back to all teams being included, but he said more teams would be participating in it. I don't know if that means second teams. I don't know if that means first teams. I don't know if that's the freedom of their choice, but we'll see what that means. I would assume that means first teams if he's referring to it, but at least for it's some momentum going back to all teams participating again. But for those hoping that it would be right back to normal again next season, doesn't sound like that's going to be the case.
yeah, the way we took it and we were kind of conversing about it was they're going to put more first teams in. There was no mention about how it affects MLS Next Pro, which I thought was interesting because that was a big sticking point last year. We're pulling them out because we want the cup to be used for our development teams so that they can get more experience in real games, right? No mention on how that'll change. My part of me believes that this might have been the US Open Cup committee bending a little bit to say, okay, bring your first teams back, help us with the promotion of it or whatever, and we'll let you keep your second teams in. Now, that's just my gut feeling. That's not a hot take or a scoop. I'm not breaking any news here. Um, I was hoping that, and I don't think you mentioned it yet, or maybe it hasn't come up yet about Leagues Cup, that they are talking about a change in the Leagues Cup schedule and how that's supposed to look.
I didn't
But
mention it yet, but go
okay,
ahead.
my hope was that with that change, it was going to lead to a full reinstation of teams in the Open Cup. Now it sounds like that's not going to be the case. We have to wait at least another year for that, but having more teams in there than last year is a step in the right direction. It's not the end all be all. It is not where we should be content with keeping it. We should have them all back in there. We've had this conversation multiple times, but that is a better that's a better scenario than it was last year. So happy with it, but I do feel like we're still just missing out.
I think it makes sense to not have everybody back next year, because you have teams like Inter Miami who, if you're making them play in the US Open Cup, is now playing like a bajillion games next season because they have US
Mhm.
Open Cup, Leagues Cup, CONCACAF Champions Cup, Club World Cup, MLS, and then MLS play. Well, maybe MLS playoffs, but like that's as much as I talk about before, like in the past, how the MLS schedule with two cups can be comparable to Europe. That's just, like I get that it's still somewhat comparable to Europe because there are European teams who are doing similar competition loads. It's not comparable when you consider the fact that MLS is capped on how much they can spend on depth in bringing in players versus Europe where you can do a Chelsea and have 100 players on your roster.
Mhm.
Um, I don't really know what the right way to go about it is. I mean, he said that teams will be participating in at least one tournament out of that very long list of different competitions that are going on. So I would assume that was going to be the case, considering all of them are probably going to be forced to at least still be in Leagues Cup. He also mentioned wanting more MLS and Liga MX matches. So I assume I took that to mean everybody's participating in Leagues Cup. That's not going to be like a US Open Cup kind of situation where some teams will participate and some won't. Could have been a good opportunity, in my opinion, to because I think two teams every year get a bye because there's not an even number of team or like even number of teams to do groups.
Hmm.
Could have been a good situation to kind of take a couple teams out, like Seattle and Inter Miami, for example, if they're doing the Club World Cup and everybody can participate in the group stages, but teach their own.
If you don't mind me jumping in there, I'm gonna try and find it, and maybe we pigeonhole this into um your notes here, but it sounds like, and I'm gonna try and find the person who broke the news so I can give them proper credit, but it sounds like Leagues Cup is looking at a version that includes 18 teams from MLS and 18 teams from Liga MX. It was Lizzie Becherano. I have no idea if I broke that properly, um, or pronounced that properly. Sorry. Leagues Cup is considering a format. This was on December 5th. Leagues Cup is considering a format that only sees 18 MLS teams participate in the upcoming edition. 2025 iteration would go 18 MLS versus 18 Liga MX, which I think is the number of Liga MX anyway.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
sure.
So it would break that. Now, there were some thoughts that that meant the playoff teams, which I think would be backwards because then you would throw them in playoffs, Leagues Cup,
Yeah.
maybe Open Cup. There's a whole bunch of different things, but because it was 9 and 9 on each side, it was going to be the top nine from each conference go. I'll hear your thoughts on that. I don't know.
I don't even like I can't even begin to think about how they're gonna make that one work. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. It's just the league complicating things again. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think putting the playoff teams in as the nine from each conference is totally backwards. If you're trying to take teams out because of congestion and
Hmm.
scheduling, like okay, you're gonna play more games in MLS Cup playoffs, and then you're gonna play more games in the Leagues Cup. And I mean, at what point are we just like it like totally defeats the purpose of taking teams out? So obviously you can't do nine teams in each conference missing the playoffs. There's gonna be some overlap in teams playing in the playoffs and teams playing in Leagues Cup. I have no idea what they're going to do. Maybe some teams that make the playoffs go do Leagues Cup, and some teams that make the playoffs do the U.S. Open Cup. I don't know if it's going to be a choice thing or if it's just going to be like you have been nominated to participate in the U.S. Open Cup this year, or you've been nominated to play in Leagues Cup this year.
Yeah,
I'll be interested
could
to
it
see
be
what
the
they say.
top? Yeah, could it be the top, nine of each conference are in Leagues Cup, and then the bottom six from each conference are in U.S. Open Cup, so that brings it up to 12, so you get more teams than last year. That could be one way to do it, right?
Yeah, could
Um,
be.
and again, eventually they need to work to a place where they can expand their rosters and play in both,
Hmm.
right? My honest guess is that they will eventually just scrap one of them, whether it be Open Cup or Leagues Cup. My guess is they're not going to scrap Leagues Cup, or they're going to try and not scrap Leagues Cup because Open Cup is in the PLS, PSL, PLS, the professional league standards. Um, and then they'll get into a whole fight about that, and it'll be a whole nightmare. It's going to be even more of a nightmare than before. But
Probably,
the
yeah.
if there are more teams in the Open Cup, it's a step in the right direction. If we can be intelligent for like 30 seconds and find the very easy way to fix this, which is just expand the rosters, because you're doing it to yourself, everything could be okay. But what do I know?
That's a whole other that's an entirely different episode all by itself. So we should avoid going down that route.
Yeah.
Um, my next point, it's another fun one. Someone had asked to, they had made mention to the draft being taken out in the, I think, NWSL.
Hmm.
I think we had talked about this a little bit in the past. The point I wanted to mention was that Don Garber fully admitted to the doxing that we joke about all the time at the drafts, where he had specifically mentioned about how they showed up to people's houses for the draft as some of like the memorable moments, and the the DP Pod streets will never forget showing up to Jack Mayer's house for his draft pick. So I'm glad that he admitted it. I'm glad that we're not looking as insane anymore. And long live the draft and all of its timeouts.
Yeah, no, uh, we have the draft conversation. I won't dive in there, but yes, please, if you're gonna get rid of the draft, you have to replace it with something as equally as memorable, like an annual doxing of the first signed college player, right? Like if you get rid of the draft, you let all the college kids like sign wherever they want. Whoever gets first licks, like whoever's the first one out there, straight to their house. I want street signs. I want house numbers. I want it all.
I want the home phone number. I want Yeah, no, seriously, I agree. All right, I'll move on to my next point here, related to my scarf. A question from the Blazing Musket about Bruce Arena. They mentioned Bruce is coming in as the San Jose head coach. They had talked about, can you expand a little bit on what had caused Bruce to kind of get
Exiled,
ex what?
exiled,
Exiled? Yeah,
excommunicated,
yeah, yeah. Okay.
excommunicated,
I was some kind of
extra
X word I was
fired,
thinking. Extra fired.
extra fired.
What had caused Bruce to get exiled and have him out for so long and then ultimately have him come back now? And he pretty much immediately shot that question down and said he wasn't going to answer it and moved on. And I know for a lot of people it's going to be like pretty much a nothing burger, but I thought it was pretty disappointing to not hear him talk about it at all. It's like clearly something happened and he was out of the game for a long time because of whatever happened. And now he's coming back. So clearly whatever happened either got resolved or it wasn't a big enough deal to keep him out of coaching forever. So I don't understand why you can't talk about it. Why can't you say, like, you're asking people, San Jose fans specifically, to root for him without having any context as to whatever he did that got himself exiled in the first place? Like, what if it was something that like a lot of San Jose fans would be very upset about and would not want to be supporting him? Like, what if they end up supporting him and then you find out later like he did something really bad? And if it, like, maybe it's not really bad because he's coming back in the first place. Like if it was truly really bad, he wouldn't be coaching again. If that's the case, why can't you talk about it or say something about it? But he just brushed it off, and we go right back to MLS being as little transparent as they have been in the past. And it's been a gripe of mine, at least. I wish they would be more transparent, and this just continued them not being transparent and being very secretive about certain things.
Part of me thinks that this is a save our ass and don't set a precedent, right? If the words came out of exactly what he said and or did to get his extra fired status, that sets a precedent, which means anytime and I don't want to say this as like I'm supporting like big business, right? Like unions are great. I think everybody should be a part of them if they want to be and have your representation and whatever. But if the MLSPA catches wind of whatever he actually said, and I'm sure they already know, by the way, and I'm sure they already know because it was a player who reported him. But if it is out there officially saying this is what he said and or did, then anytime anybody gets a slightest glimpse of something like that happening, it's another player association investigation, and you're just going to be investigating everybody and anybody. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it's MLS trying to make sure that they don't have to deal with more. They're trying to focus on the game, not the politics of coaching. And right, wrong, or indifferent, that's what I think is happening. Do I think it's the right thing? Probably not. I think they ought to be able to come out and say, okay, this is what happened. We are going to say this never happens again. And if you are a coach, stop doing that. I think the other reason they probably don't do it is because there aren't enough coaches who have been around as long as Big Bruce has, and most people don't act like that, right? I think Bruce Arena at 75, whatever, however old he is, has a different view of what a locker room is like than what it is today, if that makes
Well, I
sense.
mean, maybe they're also being a little bit more secretive because they're being a little bit more lenient with him because he has so much pedigree in this league as a coach
Sure.
versus like, and I don't mean to be, let me not call on anybody specifically because I don't want to like be like pointing blame on somebody who did nothing wrong at all.
Hmm.
So let me just say like coach A of team, I don't know. Let me think of a country. I mean, not a country, a city. The one that doesn't have a team.
Albuquerque.
The Boise Ballers, if coach of the Boise Ballers, who just started his first year head coach there, has like no affiliation with the league before then, does whatever Bruce did. Like I would say there's a likelier chance that he just gets exiled and that's it. It's done with. Versus Bruce, who's obviously like, I mean, I don't know what happened, but he's clearly a legend of the game, very legendary coach. So maybe they're being more lenient about so that they can like continue to have him around the league in the game.
Word of the day is exile. I see. You've said
Well,
that
yeah, I
about
can't.
four times since you learned it.
I can't think of another word to like. I do like extra fired, so I should do that one
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah. Like I said, it pays to be legendary. No doubt about it. Grace heard legendary was like, that's me.
She wanted to get her 2 cents in. I think the last thing I had on my notes that I wanted to cover, somebody had asked about changes to the player spending rules, and the general answer I got from that was that they're in the middle of a collective bargaining agreement. Probably not going to be any changes next year or maybe even the year after. I'm pretty sure you had looked this up in the past. I think like the next collective bargaining agreement period is like it was either 2027 or 2028, I think. I can't remember exactly, but it was like a few years away from when these massive changes could potentially happen. And maybe if that is the case, like you had said, maybe 2027 is the time, right after all the you gain all of the exposure from the World Cup and the Club World Cup and all that stuff.
That was the most disappointing part of this entire thread that I was reading while I was at the vet with Grace. They took her in and I was like, scroll, 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 scroll. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? What is he saying? To be in a point where you've got the World Cup, the Club World Cup, the best player in history, the most eyeballs on your league ever, and to come out and be like, yeah, don't anticipate any big changes to spending over the next few years after like 18 months of being like, we're looking at it, we're looking at it, we're going to take advantage of it, we're going to go hard, we're going to go at it, we're going to, and then to be like, oh yeah, don't expect anything. That just it floored me. I was like, how are you going to come out here and keep telling me you're looking at it, you're going to press it, you're going to go for it, you're going to really, really take advantage of this and say, oh yeah, we're not actually going to open up our spending. We're just going to change the way that you can spend a little bit. I think that is the biggest miss that he has in this entire thread.
But that's consistent for him though. He as long as he's been commissioner, it's always been a very slow process in terms of loosening up the financial restrictions. And it probably will take somebody new coming in for some significant changes to come in, which based on his press conference doesn't sound like it's going to be a lot longer. It sounded like he might be only sticking around for a few more years and then there's going to be a new commissioner. So for those people that are maybe looking for more wholesale changes in player or in roster rules, then maybe it's only a few more years and then you'll finally get that. But I totally agree with you. I think it's ridiculous to ask teams to participate in 4 or 5 different competitions and then be like, yeah, but you get the same rules of spending as you did 10 years ago when you participated in like 3 at most.
Oh, forget that. Like I just the opportunity that you are just passing up on to really change the way that you do your to do everything. The way to change the way you do everything because you don't want to allow those who want to spend a little bit more. Kills me. And again, I've been a long time proponent of slow and steady, do it right. Don't blow it up for no reason. It feels like we're at a time where we can do it. It feels like we're at the time where the attendance for each club is there, the eyeballs are there. It feels like you have enough where this isn't a oh, there's soccer down the road. There are enough people who are like, oh, I'm not going to the game because like they've got reasons not to go. It's not because they don't know about it. And if they don't know about it, there are enough people around who are then saying, hey, come on, let's do it. And then you start bringing people in. Whether they stay or not, I don't know. But it just doesn't feel like we are at a point where we're so insignificant in the American soccer landscape where you're not going to see a return on that investment. But maybe that's just me. I don't know.
Not just you. I'm in agreement with you. I don't know what it'll take at this point to get it. I mean, unless like if we don't get anything in 2027, like after the World Cup and the Club World Cup and all that, I honestly don't know what it'll take at that point to get more roster freedom.
It'll take a new commissioner. That's what it'll take.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I know Garber just re-upped, and I I'm real curious as to what happened. We have to be a podcast until that happens because that's the news we need to be there for. No, it's Garber's never been shy about who he's been and the way that he approaches stuff like this. Slow and steady, we're going to get it right. And we're not going to do things just because we think it sounds fun in the moment. We're going to really plan it. We're going to make sure we know what we're doing. Is it the right decision? History will have its eyes on it, right? And you'll figure it out at some point. But man, it, I don't know. I just feel like it's time to. And I've never been one to say blow it all up completely and just open it up and spend whatever you want. Never been that type of guy. But man, just double it.
Yeah.
What's an extra 5 mil, right? I mean, you're buying players for what? 15 these days? Like, what's an extra five? Your owners are worth billions. Billions with a B. An extra five, they drop it on the side of the road. They don't look at it. Like,
And you could keep the same rules in place where you only get 3 designated players and 3 U22s or 2 designated players and 4 U22s. And then you could just take the rest of the money, properly pay people to have an actual depth on your team, as opposed to having like 15-year-olds on your bench for MLS Cup final.
I almost feel like they need MLS Next Pro to get to a point where they're like, this is a really good development league. And once they're comfortable there, then they'll say, okay, now we don't need them to be on the bench to get, MLS experience. We can run this third division league and it'll be fine. And then we can call them up and they'll produce and whatever. I think that's a whatever, but
Yeah. I had no other points on my list. I don't know if there's anything on yours you wanted to cover still.
there was a comment that Garber said that there's a communication issue, right? And that the league isn't doing a good job telling people there are free games to watch. Don't disagree, right? The amount of people that I saw on X or Blue Sky, or not really Blue Sky, just Twitter, and they were like, "I can't believe that the U.S. Open Cup is going to Apple TV, and they want me to pay to watch the U.S. Open Cup after they tried to leave it and kill the cup and all this stuff." And I mean, 900 different times the official U.S. Open Cup account was like, "Guys, it's free to watch. It's free to watch. It's free to watch." I mean, just over and over and over again. And the same answer was, yeah, well, I'm still not going to Apple because it's MLS tainted or whatever. I think that you can easily
You're
get
never
it
going to
out
win
there.
those people over.
And you never will. You never will. But I do think that there's an easy way to get out, right? I think one of the conversations was along the lines of like, when you're watching linear TV, NFL, for example, right? This is a Sunday night we're recording, and you've got breaks in the action. You got ads for the next game coming up, right? Oh, stick around for the 4 o'clock game, or here are what next week's games look like, or here's this, or here's that. When you're on regular TV and you're watching, you get ads for Sunday Night Football and all the other things. You can slide it in there and say, hey, go on to the app and watch these games. I think they can do a better job at doing that. If they take advantage of it, I have no idea.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a fair quote by him, and I think your assessment of it in terms of like a resolution, I think is also a good plan.
Mhm.
It's just how much they're willing to actually invest in marketing for the US Open Cup. I mean, considering
Not even
that
not even
there's
the
only
cup, not even the cup, but they're all the free game we talked about. They put 40% of their games free.
yeah, I
But
mean
who
for
knows
their own
about it?
games, I'm sure they will. They wouldn't hesitate to market for them.
No,
I
and
think they'd
and
be
well,
more
and
hesitant
that's
to
a problem.
market for the
When's the last time you saw an ad for, uh, you know, free MLS games?
I don't know. I mean, in fairness, I'm not really looking for ads for free MLS games, but
Well, that's
I
that's
also
the
I also
thing,
don't have cable, so it's not like I'm gonna get ads for it
and
on
and
cable.
that's where your catch 22 is, right? You can't buy advertisement space on Netflix. I mean, you can, but how are you going to do that?
I mean, you do it in other ways. You buy advertisements on YouTube. Like
Yeah,
everybody watches
YouTube,
YouTube of like all ages.
Spotify, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You find other way you do it on I mean, I probably wouldn't do it on Twitter. Twitter's a cesspool, so
Yeah, get out of there.
don't give them more money. But
Yeah.
there's other ways you can advertise it without having to. I mean, he even said too, like the fan base is like young. It's like getting younger, and
Hmm.
so cable shouldn't be the direction that the league moves, and cable shouldn't be the direction that you're doing advertising because young people aren't getting cable, and Apple TV makes much more sense for people who are basically getting into adulthood and skipping cable and just buying like the different types of services, Netflix, Hulu, all that stuff. So it makes sense. I think the direction with the Apple TV deal and the advertising should be in the direction of the younger crowd if that's the crowd that is continuously growing and becoming the majority in your fanship.
Yeah, no disagreement. That's the only one I wanted to add.
Good stuff. All right.
Finish
That's
it
it
up. It's your
No,
episode.
I don't do the
Finish it
outro.
up.
I no, I can't do the
Oh,
outros. Okay, bye.
oh man, this is why I'm in charge and Connor's just there with a smile. Thanks everybody for listening. Again, we really appreciate you guys. Getting us all the way to 600 subscribers on YouTube was such a cool thing to see today, and it really made me smile. You've got to go follow us wherever you get your podcast. The next time we go live, I did want to just look at our stats. We are over 20,000 downloads over the last 5 years, which is not a lot realistically, but kind of cool, you know. So thanks everybody for listening. We're really enjoying work. We enjoy hanging out with you and talking with you and interacting with you. So make sure you go follow us on social media too, Blue Sky, YouTube, TikTok, and the other one with the X. Um, and yeah, let's continue to push. Let's get over to the thousand subscriber mark on YouTube, and yeah, keep going. We're really excited for next season. We got a couple more interviews to finish the season up. We'll take a little bit of a break, and then we are right back at it with not so deep dives in 2025. But until next episode, we'll see you next time. Bye bye.